What's going on, guys? This is Michael with the Shutter Review, and today we're going to have a quick video going through Adobe Lightroom and the basics of using Adobe Lightroom to edit raw images. And if you don't know what a raw image is pretty much an image that I like to describe it as like a sandwich. So a JPEG image is compressed and it would be like a small sandwich, one piece of meat on it, whereas a raw image would be like that giant sandwich that you see on like Scooby-Doo, that cartoonish giant sandwich. And the way I describe it is because the giant sandwich is going to have a lot more to it. It's got a lot more stuff in it. So that's what a raw image is. It's got a lot more information in it. It's a larger file size, and it gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to like editing images and anything like that. I highly recommend shooting in RAW. And for any photographer out there, and if you're unsure with it, that's why we're here today. I'm going to show you how to edit raw images and different types of raw images real quick, just to show you the basics. So just to give you an example, this is a picture I took of the tide pools in California, and let me get a good image here. Let's see. Well, this is edited and this is not edited. So you can see there's a huge difference there, and it just shows you the power of photographing in RAW. You can basically turn an image into something completely different, and it gives you more flexibility, and it lets you, because I consider photographers artists. I think photography is a form of art, and it allows us as artists to create the image the way that we truly want to see it, because a raw image, of course, is going to look very flat and boring, but we can always turn it into this. And today we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and go through that and just show you guys. I'm not going to do this exact thing, but I'm going to show you kind of just the basics of photography editing when it comes to RAW. So over here, you have your image uploaded into Adobe Lightroom, and we're going to go through just like the edit panel right here, which is going to be, there's going to be another smaller panel here, and it's the one with the three little stripes on it with circles. And if you hover over it, it says edit, like so. And that's how you pop that up. And then right here, you'll see two things, edit, and two things under it. Well, there's three actually. There's HDR, but we're not going to go into that. There's auto, which will automatically, if we click on that, it'll automatically kind of set the settings of what Adobe believes is the best looking image, or maybe like just to give you a foundation and a guideline of like, hey, this is what we think looks best. We kind of like balanced everything out to where we think the image is like clear and better looking, which, I mean, obviously, as you can tell, it definitely does look a little bit better. But, I do recommend doing this for people, especially if they're learning, because it can kind of just like show you, like give you a base to work off of, because sometimes you're a little bit hesitant and you're like, oh, I'm not sure I'm supposed to move this one or not, but it kind of just does it for you automatically. And then if you do black and white, it just changes it to black and white. So that's an easy way to just do it, but we're going to jump into our little panels here and learn how to adjust these sliders. So you'll notice the first one is light. Obviously, light is important for photography. It's actually the most important thing for photography, because without light, there is no photography. Even if it's like a small amount of light coming from the starry sky or the moon or anything like that, light is super important. So the first one's exposure. So obviously this is going to adjust the exposure. So if we bring it down, the image will get darker and the exposure will drop. If you bring it up, it'll get brighter, and you can see the sky's becoming overexposed right now. And if that's the style you're going for, that's great. But typically I like to see the clouds a little bit. So I feel like I'm going to pull that down maybe a tiny bit, but I'm just kind of showing you what each one does and their purpose. So in the original shot, if we double click on these little circles, it'll go back to the middle. So if you're ever somewhere and you're like, I don't like that, I want to reset it, you just double click on that dot and it'll go back to the middle. So for exposure, that's one I really don't play with too much, because I think my camera generally, I set the exposure to what it is, like, what I want it to be. So I don't want to like make it brighter or darker or anything. Plus it turns everything darker, which I don't really like. We're going to focus more on other things later, but we'll get to them. The next thing is going to be contrast. Contrast, as it says, it brings a little more depth and contrast to the image. If you don't know what contrast is, it just kind of, I feel like it adds, like, even though there's a texture thing right here, I feel like it adds a little bit more texture, and I don't know, just like, it honestly texture to the image and just brings like the edges out a little bit and just makes it a little bit just more detailed in a way. So contrast is a great one to have. I think it's very important for people who like softer images or not so much contrast, and maybe that's not the best, but contrast is one that you kind of move around. You can kind of see what it does here. So the contrast definitely darkens it a bit, like especially the rocks and stuff. and it kind of makes the sky a little bit overexposed. So that's contrast. The next one would be highlights. Highlights and shadows are like probably two of my favorite ones when it comes to adjusting the light sliders. The first thing is highlight. So highlight is great because you can, so for example, if we go to exposure, notice the rocks are getting darker too. Like the sky is definitely a little overexposed, but you'll see that the rocks are also dropping down because it's doing the entire image. It's not just doing the highlights. So if you want to just like focus on the sky, the highlights is a great thing to work with, because then you can just pull back on that and you'll see the rocks won't really change. The exposure on the rocks, it'll kind of remain the same, and the sky will begin to show itself. So way too bright, and then the sky, we're going to bring that down, and look, now the sky is visible. Now you can see the clouds, and you can see the details in the clouds. So that's really why highlights is great. If you ever have any shots and you want to like just work on the highlighted areas of the shots, which would be something like this right here, that's really great where highlights come into play. And again, shadows is going to be what it says. It's going to work on the shadows, which is probably going to work more on this stuff right here. So if we grab the shadow slider, and let's say like this right here, I want you to look right there. So if we bring that up, you'll notice that the shadows in the rocks start coming out more. You know, so that's definitely something that's very useful, and I use it a lot, especially to bring out shadows. In this situation, I want to show more of the rocks, so I'm going to bring the shadows up a bit, and we're going to see the rocks a little bit more now. So that's a great thing. These are honestly my two favorites, but the shadows is also a very versatile and great slider when it comes to Lightroom. The next one's going to be the whites and blacks. So it's going to be very similar to highlights and shadows. The whites are going to grab from all the like whites in the shot, and you can adjust them as well. But you can see that it's also doing the whites on the rocks, so you can kind of just adjust that a bit however you'd like. So you can maybe bring the whites out more. You can bring them down a bit if you feel like they're too much. And then the blacks is, I mean, I don't know if you heard the term before, but it's called crush the blacks. It's basically just what it does. It goes through all the darker shots, the blacks in the shot, and it kind of just adjusts that as well. You can see it's doing the whole shot. Like this area right here is a little bit of black in it, so it's going to adjust that a bit. So that's kind of what the blacks does. And the term crush the blacks, basically a lot of photographers do like to bring this down because it kind of adds something to the image that they really find appealing. You know, I also like to do it depending on what I'm shooting, but you can always bring this down, or you can even bring it up if you want it to be a little bit brighter. You know, I definitely do like to crush it down a bit. It kind of just, it adds something to the image that I love, and it kind of just, you know, just again, guys, when it comes to using Lightroom, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to want a different looking image, and they're going to want their image to emote differently. So feel free to have fun and play with these. We're just going through them, and I'm kind of discussing what each one does. So as you can see, if we, in this little eyeball right here next to light, if you hold on that, it'll show you the original image and the changes. And you can see that's a big dramatic change. That already looks so much better than the previous image. And this was just moving these sliders a little bit. So it shows you guys the power of raw photography and how much how much information a raw image, again, giant sandwich, a raw image holds inside of it. So that's why I highly recommend shooting raw, but that's probably why you guys are here, to learn how to edit raw images. So lights, definitely, as you can see, it's on the top, so I would definitely call it the most important. You can always adjust these as well if you want to put the lights down here, but we're going to jump to the next panel here, which is color. So color is going to change the color of the image. So, you know, in this image, we have like a little bit of like, it looks like gold or something, some sort of algae on these rocks. You have a little bit of green right here that's not really popping out as much. So, you know, would be a great way to kind of make those colors pop a little bit. That's what's great about the color panels. The first thing that's here is temperature. So color temperature is warmer or cooler. So depending on your mood for the image, maybe you want to make this image a little more cheerful, uplifting. So we can bring the warmth up and you can see that change. I want to bring it up way high to show you the difference. That's warm, and then that's cool. So maybe you're going for, personally me, I think in this situation, it's winter time, so I would love like a kind of a cooler shot and stuff like that. But if you ever want to go in the opposite direction, maybe you're photographing a family, you know, and they're smiling, it's engagement photos, and you want to make it warmer, you can always just bring the temperature up and make the image look warm, bright, sunny, cheery. And maybe if you're going for a more moody, you know, you can go for a cooler temperature. And guys, like, colors really evoke emotion in people. So depending on what you want to get from your image, the color temperature slider right here is very important. But right now we're just going to jump it down to maybe a little bit bluer, because I do want this photo to look blue, because it was at sunset, and you know, the coast, I love the California coast, and you know, I feel like in this shot in particular, it's very cloudy. You know, I want to kind of evoke that mood of like, ooh, like very cool, very cloudy. So we're gonna leave that there. So the tint changes what it says, the tint of the color. So you can kind of just mess with the tint a little bit. It goes from green to more of a purpley tint. This one I don't really play around with that much, but that's something that, you know, is there at your disposal if you want to kind of mess around with the tint a little bit. Like I said, not my thing. Also, dialing back a bit, you can also see here. So for white balance, which is going to be the color, you can kind of change it, have it do auto as well up here if you just want to mess with this. And then you can just do auto, you can do daylight, all these things. Sorry I skipped this part, but you know, this is something that you can also just jump to, and it'll show you a preview of what it looks like. So in this case, it is cloudy. So if we would probably do cloudy, and it automatically, Adobe will go in their Lightroom and automatically determine, okay, this is the best looking, you know, settings for your cloudy image, because we're, you know, it's cloudy right now, but we're not. That's something that you can use. You know, again, I recommend it for beginners because it gives you a kind of like a base foundation, and then you can build from there. So if we do like click cloudy, it'll kind of move these around a little bit and kind of set the image to what it believes is the best for the cloudy. And then from here, you can kind of mess with it. But we're going to go back to as shot, and we're just going to continue to do it ourselves. And the next thing would be vibrance. This is a very good one. So you can see this image is a little muted. There's some green right here from this algae. There's also some like moss or something on these rocks right here. So if we bring the vibrance up, it's going to kind of make the colors just pop more, you know. So you can see there. In fact, let's bring the temperature up because you can see it better when the temperature is a little bit higher. So we'll bring the color temp up, and then if we bring the vibrance up, you can see the colors kind of like reveal themselves better. The ocean gets bluer, that moss gets a little bit like darker brown, and then the green algae down there, the seaweed, is also, you know, the greens are popping a little bit more. So vibrance really affects the color and like the power of the color and like how much is coming through. Now, if you want the opposite, and let's say you do want a muted image and you don't want so much color in there, you want it more neutral, you can pull this down and it'll make the image look more neutral looking until eventually it turns into black and white. So that's what vibrance does. Very useful tool. Vibrance and saturation are probably vibrance, saturation are the ones I use the most. So if you want to like add a little more pop to your color, just bring it up and look at that. Just changes immediately, or you can bring it down and make it black and white. Whatever you're going for in your image. Saturation is very similar to vibrance. Kind of adds just more saturation to the colors and stuff like that. So again, bring it up, and you can see it changes the colors. It brings up the saturation a little bit, and you can bring it down and mute it even more, and eventually just make it black and white as well. So again, this is the color panel, guys. This is something that's like very useful when it comes to using Lightroom and adjusting your image. And if we drop down a little bit more to the next one, we have effects. So this is other things that we're going to be working on. So just to kind of show you the next ones here. So this texture is similar to contrast in my opinion, but it adds a lot more contrast. So it'll make the image almost looks like it has texture in it. So if we bring that up, you'll see that texture start popping out. But if you bring it up too high, it gets really noisy because there's going to be a little bit of noise in your images, so that it'll also reveal that noise. That's why I don't like bringing texture too much. But if you're going for that overly texture image, or like you want to add more detail, maybe you photographed, like, let's say a bird, and you want to show that detail in its wings and feathers, this would be a great way to do that. You just bring the texture up and it'll bring out that texture in the wings and stuff like that. In this case, I don't really like using too much texture. I mean, it, like I said, it has its place depending on what style you're going for, but texture will do what it says. It adds texture. And if you go the opposite direction, it'll remove texture. It'll make the image look softer and more dreamlike, you know? So this is like realistic and then more dreamlike. So again, this is something you guys can play with. Clarity is also very similar to texture, but as you can see, it kind of brings up the highlights as well when doing it, but it also adds kind of like a textury feel and more clarity to the image. Again, if you go too much, I think that's a little too much, but like I said, guys, it's all about you. You are the photographer, you are the artist, you choose whatever you like to do. And then if you go the opposite direction, it mutes it. So a good thing to remember in color and effects, like this way kind of mutes it a bit, except for temperature, and the other way kind of just brings it out more. So if we're going for, we'll go back to my cool image, we'll add that. We'll bring the texture down to make it kind of dreamy looking, because I want it to be like a dreamy coast image, like cool looking. Bring the clarity down a bit, and you can see that it kind of, the image has changed completely. So dehaze is something that I personally don't use a lot of, but it's, again, like, you know, you can use it as well, but it kind of, you can see if you move it to one side, it kind of just brings more detail into the clouds. And if you it overexposed if you go the other way. But this is also, like, guys, all the tools are useful for whatever you want to do, but again, dehaze is not something I technically use, but you can see what it does here. Wow, that looks like a, that's weird. Yeah, but anyway, so dehaze, another useful tool there, so you kind of like bring more detail into it, and then you can also do the reverse and like kind of like brings out more of the light and stuff like that, so almost makes it look like dreamlike even more. And then the vignette is something that I use, and I think it's very important for me anyway. I know a lot of people, there's people out there that hate vignette, but I love vignette. I think it adds a little bit, especially for a landscape, it adds like a little bit to the corner. So vignette adds that dark circle around it. And then you can do a white circle as well if you're doing like a portrait of somebody and you want to make it like dreamy looking and nice. You can also do that as well. For me personally, for landscapes, most of the time it's just landscapes, I will add like a little bit of vignette to kind of like just kind of bring the center of attention, like the people's eyes to the center, you know, and kind of like encapsulate and add a frame to it in a way. You can also add grain to an image if you want to, like, you know, make it more grainy looking and stuff like that. Again, this is all personal preference or whatever the job is calling for. So that's all the effects. So we have texture, clarity, dehaze, vignette, grain, and then we have sharpening. Sharpening is going to do exactly what it says. It's going to sharpen the image. Now, if you overdo it, you know, the noise will come out and stuff like that. You'll kind of see a little bit of the noise and stuff. So typically, I don't mess with sharpening too much unless I have an image that was a little bit missed and it's like a little blurry, and you know, I'm trying to save it and it's the only image I have of whatever shoot I did. I will bump up the sharpening a little bit to kind of save the image and maybe like sharpen out the edges a little bit to make it look less blurry and stuff, because you will come across a time where you're photographing and you do have only one and it's the best image and it's still a little blurry. Like sharpening can definitely help you a little bit with that. And then at the bottom, we have noise reduction. So if you don't know what noise reduction does, it reduces. So images have noise in them, and this will reduce the noise. It will make the image look more softer. I don't know if you can see it on screen, but it'll definitely pull out a little bit of detail. But if you pull up the luminance, it'll get rid of that noise. And what noise is like the artifacts in the image, especially when you're shooting in low light, you'll see like a grainy, nasty looking effect, especially shooting very low light on, especially on like a small camera sensor. So what luminance does, it just helps take out all that noise, and honestly it doesn't look too bad, especially when it's removing the noise. It depends on how sharp you want your images, but it definitely sacrifices sharpness when you use luminance, but it will go in there and remove the noise. And they have a new program in Lightroom too, where or a feature that you can reduce noise just using basically AI, and you click on this and it'll automatically go in there and kind of be like, hey, this is what we think we can remove the noise, and I'll show you a little preview on there. That's something that you guys can use. A lot of the Adobe programs are using AI now. I still don't use them because, I mean, I know AI has its place. I have no problem with it. I use AI in Photoshop. I think it's great. But I think here, I don't think AI is very necessary. I think just using the manual noise reduction works great. And then color as well. You can adjust that for noise reduction if you're looking to remove noise in an image. And then the optics and lens blur, you can also add that as well. You can remove the chromatic aberration. You can enable lens corrections. You can turn those off. You can see if I turn it off, it kind of goes back to what it was. But what that does is whenever you're taking a photo with like a wide lens or something, it'll kind of warp the image a bit. So it'll kind of fix it to make it look a little bit cleaner for you. That's what the lens correction does. And again, these are all things that you guys can go around and play with. I don't want to go too much into them because this is like a basic editing thing and it could take forever to go through all of this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to edit an image here. Let's see here. Let's pick a decent one. like here. This starfish. Yeah, that's a good image. So that one I already did. There we go. Here's a good one. Yeah. So as this image, you can see we have it's very white right here. We have our starfish, which is the photo I took of this gigantic starfish at the tide pool. So from here, the exposure looks decent, so I probably won't mess with that too much. It is a little bit overexposed right here. So what I would go in there and do is go to the highlights, maybe pull that down a bit. You can see that's changing. And even if I'll even pull it down all the way if I want more of this information to come out. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I'm actually just getting over a cold right now. And from here, the shadows, you can mess with that a little bit. I think the shadows look fine. Actually, there's a little bit of shadows here. So we're going to bump that up a bit. Kind of reveal this rock a little bit more. And the whites, I don't really like to mess with too much. I don't want to like, I'm just going to keep that there. Like, it's simple, guys. Like, the thing with Lightroom too is like, don't overthink it. You know, I honestly, for my wedding photography, I do very minimal editing to my photos. I try to make sure my camera settings are proper and the photo should look really good. And then I should just make small adjustments to it. And then I move on to the next photo, especially when you're processing a lot of photos. So I would say, unless you're doing something very particular, like the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Like, don't go too crazy with it, because then it just looks really, like, I don't know, not as natural, you know. So here you can see I will definitely crush the blacks on this one a little bit. So now if we go to here, before, after, and you can already tell the image is looking much better. Temperature, we're going to make it warmer. Not too much warmer. Actually, I do look kind of like the cool. So you can see that's cooler, that's warmer. And we'll make it warmer. I want to make it a nice image, even though this was shot like at sunset. Tint, we're not going to mess with. Vibrance, I will definitely use because we have an orange starfish in there. I want to bring out that orange in them a little bit. Saturation, I'll bring up a bit as well. Not too much. Texture, let's see what that does. Okay, so you can see the texture in this image. It's definitely bringing out the starfish, texture on the starfish a little bit. So that's not too bad, but it's also kind of doing some weird things over here. So I don't want to mess with that too much. Maybe like a tiny bit. Clarity actually adds a little bit to this image as well. Dehaze vignette. I like to add vignettes. I don't know why. I think it just kind of adds something to the image. But you can see here, now we have before and after, and it's just minor changes, but it really is helpful and it really does mean something, guys. So I want you to know that in Lightroom, the key takeaways here is very simple, guys. Learn it, work with it, use the auto if you have to, and you know, start from there. If you click auto, I don't recommend it, but if you are trying to learn and you want like a base, maybe you have like a very overexposed photo, auto will definitely help you bring it down and give you the base to kind of work with. Because even if you do hit auto, you can still adjust these. That's for beginners. And then everyone else, like light, color, effects, and then sharpening if you want to do that. Those are really the only things that you're going to need for Lightroom, especially when you're doing like basic photo editing. And, you know, if you want to get crazy with it as well, you can use presets and stuff like that. But this is like the basics of Lightroom, and I hope it was helpful for you guys. But, you know, and I want to also congratulate you guys because you're watching this. Maybe you've decided to start shooting RAW, and you made one of the best decisions in the world. RAW is an amazing way to shoot, and I think every professional photographer or even amateur or prosumer photographers, they need to shoot RAW. RAW is definitely very helpful, and this just kind of shows you the power of RAW. Like, for example, this image here versus this image, you know, like this, it's like night and day. Like you can just turn something like this into this, you know. So always shoot RAW, guys. It's a very great way to photograph. But thank you for watching the video. Sorry it was so long. I tried making it as short as possible, but there's so much to Lightroom, and I'm going to be uploading a lot of these Lightroom videos, so check out the shutter view to see the little tutorial videos I'm uploading. But I hope it was helpful to you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.